What is up, Packers fans? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Momentarily, we're going to be joined by the wonderful Paul Bretl. Excited to break down with him all the things that went wrong and some things that, quite frankly, went right, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Dug into some of the play in the secondary and what's been so impressive about them, as well as the defensive front. And we'll walk through some of the things that Green Bay certainly needs to correct moving forward as well. Before we get there, I need to tell you, and just be totally honest, I have not done a good enough job telling you about Luigi's Pizza's Big Daddy Garlic Dippers. And yes, they are as wonderful as you could possibly imagine. Just when I thought that Luigi's could not get any more incredible, I had the garlic dippers for the first time. For the Big Daddy one, they are unbelievable, out of this world. They've got that unbelievable garlic flavor, but it's just in the right amount. You dip those things in some marinara. Oh my God. I might need to take a time out just to go get some right now. Check them out at your local grocer, Luigi's Pizza, luigispizza.com, and on social media at Luigi's Pizza. Also, my good friend Ryan Nelson, Alchemy Wealth Management. All right, you're going to want to check this out. Free retirement consultation, retirewithryan.net. The coolest thing is that Ryan's awesome to work with. So you can schedule a free consultation right on that website for Pack-A-Day viewers and listeners only, retirewithryan.net. You're going to want to get that set up. They've also got some free literature on the website as well. So make sure to check it all out. I cannot recommend it enough, and you're going to love working with Ryan. I know getting ready for retirement sounds like a whole to-do. When you're working with Ryan, it's certainly not. So make sure to check that out again at retirewithryan.net, and you can find the link in the description notes below as well. All right, we've got a lot to get into with Paul Bretl, so let's not waste any more time, and let's jump right in to that conversation with Paul. All right, we're being joined now by Paul Bretl, Wisconsin State Journal. Of course, you can find him on social media at Paul_Bretl. Always excited to chat with Paul. Wish we were talking about a win, but Paul, welcome in. How are you doing, my friend?
Excellent, Andy. Happy to be here.
Hey, thanks for being here. We've got a lot to get into. I know that this is a game that, again, I think both of us were expecting to be talking about a win. Unfortunately, it was not. As always, I like to give you the floor first, and I will let you go in any direction that you want. What were kind of your key takeaways from this game, as we've had a couple days now to kind of think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously what's going to stand out is the self-inflicted mistakes made by the Packers, and not just in that final 5-ish minutes, but throughout the course of the game. But to maybe find a silver lining or try to put some sort of glass half full look on this, you hope that everything that the Packers experienced in this game and leading up to it as well can be a learning opportunity for them this season, and something that they can build off of moving forward to have them playing more sound football, especially towards the end of the season, because that's the ultimate goal. And Brian Gutekunst has talked about this. You want to be playing your best football at the end of the year. And while obviously that type of loss, any loss hurts, but that loss where you seem to have it in your grasp up until the final minutes is going to hurt. Those penalties, those miscues can be that learning opportunity. So if there's a point a month from now, the end of the season, and you're having early penalties or the opponent is punching you in the face, you know how to respond in those moments better. Because what you don't want to have happen is those moments of adversity arise, especially in critical games, critical moments towards the end of the season, and you haven't been in those positions before. Because a lot of times, if you haven't experienced something, knowing not just how to respond, but how to respond quickly, because you've been there before, that's 100% can be the difference between winning a game and losing a game. So what the Packers experienced in this game, the penalties, the turnover, the blocked field goal at the end, can hopefully be that learning opportunity for them. So they're then, if those moments arise again later on in the season, they've been here before, they know how to respond in those situations. And of course, part of that as well is having experienced that. Hopefully you don't run into, at least penalty wise, things like that type of performance again either.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope. And if they can use it as a learning opportunity and actually fix those mistakes, it'll certainly be a valuable lesson for them that they can learn early in the season. A small silver lining is that if you had to pick a loss in the season, a AFC North opponent is one that's probably the best. It doesn't affect tiebreakers in the division. In the conference, you're giving a win to an AFC team rather than an NFC team, but that is a very small, very, very, very small consolation prize for Packers fans, to say the least. You mentioned those mistakes, miscues, attention to detail stuff. We saw the penalties. We saw a lot of the errors that came in this game. what is Green Bay? Because this is not the first time that this has been a story for the Packers. We've seen this sort of story before, and certainly in sometimes games coming off of either bye weeks or longer rest periods, and even sometimes against teams where you wouldn't expect it. This isn't, again, the first time that this has happened. So how can Green Bay go about fixing some of these and making sure that this is not a narrative that continues to take place in games like this?
Yeah, and it's early in the season, so 14 penalties in one game like the Packers had is going to skew the numbers, but I think they're averaging, I saw 9.3 penalties per game through the first 3 games of this season, and that's, I think, bottom 5 in the NFL. So it hasn't hurt them as much in those first 2 games. And again, it wasn't 14, but they were able to overcome those penalties in those games. But Matt LaFleur talked about how it starts with what they're doing in practice, right? And it's not just the players, it's on the coaches too, the fundamentals, the techniques, and even in the practices, calling things maybe more closely to better mirror what in-game situations might be like. So players are more aware and better prepared from a penalty perspective. Because again, 14 penalties in a game is a ton. But it wasn't just the quantity of the penalties, it's when those penalties happened, a lot of them as well. I mean, even that drive that ended in a field goal, Jordan Morgan, false start, went from 3rd and 4 to 3rd and 9. Next play is incomplete. A false start by Jordan Morgan took away a Tucker Kraft first down. They had a 12-play drive going where they were at the Cleveland 38-yard line in a sequence of something in the effect of penalty, run, sack, penalty, all of a sudden had them back near midfield, and now they're out of field goal range and eventually punted. The Rasheed Walker false start. Brandon McManus's kick was 5 yards further back, right? Micah Parsons' penalty gave the Browns 5 yards to start their field goal drive. So it's when those penalties happen that were so deflating as well and took away potential other scoring opportunities for the Packers, or at least the ability to sustain longer drives. And Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, after the game, they made sure to give credit to this Browns defense. Because again, the fact that there were 5 false start penalties against that defensive front that features Myles Garrett and a lot of really good players, that's not a coincidence. The Packers offensive line was obviously very aware of who they were going up against and the need to get that quick first step, right, to get off the ball as fast as possible. So it's a very much a credit to the Browns defense as well for being the one to kind of be the one doing the dictating that eventually led to so many of the mistakes that the Packers made.
No, I do think the Browns defense does deserve a lot of credit in this game. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but just going back to the penalties, I think the big one to me is like some of the like conflict penalties and things like that. You can live with those. Those are in the heat of battle. You know, obviously you don't want to have, too many of them or whatever, but those are going to happen from being aggressive from time to time. The pre-snap penalties are the ones that I think there's so much low-hanging fruit to just kind of take advantage of and to make sure that you're correcting those. If you look at it, the teams that lead the league in pre-snap penalties right now, Minnesota is 16, they're 1-2. New Orleans at 15 is 0-3. Tennessee, 14, 0-3. Green Bay is the lone kind of exception here. They are 4th with 12 pre-snap penalties. So they're averaging 4 per game so far, which is insane. Houston, 11, 0-3. New England, 10. What are they? 1-2, 0-3, something in that range. Atlanta, 10, I think 1-2. So like you are grouped with the worst teams, arguably in football, in Minnesota, New Orleans, Tennessee, Houston, New England, and Atlanta, or of these teams that are committing these really high amount of pre-snap penalties. And thankfully, they've been able to overcome it in 2 of their 3 games so far. But that to me is the one where if you can just get rid of those 12, that's 12 of their 28 are pre-snap penalties. So if they could just cut down on those and make it so that those are not an issue as much, man, would that give them such an advantage. And to your point, in all of those plays, it was a huge factor in this game against the Browns. The one that still sticks with me, even though it didn't matter at all, is the offsides on the field goal that you were trying to block at the end of the game, where like, even if they missed the 55-yarder, which is no gimme, you would have given them another chance at that one as well, which would have really, like, I'm almost just happy he made it now, because I think I would have been more sick to my stomach if he missed the field goal at the end and then you got another chance and then hit the second one. So yeah, they just really got to figure out a way to clean up those pre-snap penalties.
Yeah. And this Browns defense, as we saw, I mean, they're one of the best units in the NFL. So a 5-yard penalty and going from a 3rd and 3, for example, to having to pick up a third and 8 against that defense where that front is constantly in the backfield, that aggressive secondary. I mean, that's already taking a difficult challenge and just putting yourself in a even more difficult spot to have to overcome that. And Matt LaFleur said too, there's some the ones on the offense are what we're highlighting where they're going to stand out, but there are some on the defense as well that helped extend drives for that Browns offense. So absolutely something that has to get cleaned up.
Yeah, definitely a point of emphasis, I am sure, this week for Green Bay as they get ready for Dallas. I want to talk about a couple other pieces on the offense. Let's talk about Jordan Love first, because I think in totality on the season through the 3 games so far, I mean, certainly statistically, he's up there. From a quarterback rating standpoint, he's up there. He's got the 1 interception now, which was a extremely costly interception. Nobody is debating that. It seems like the bar is extremely high for Jordan Love, which maybe rightfully so. But there seems to be a lot of angst and frustration right now for QB1, despite, in my opinion, playing some really great football outside of one really boneheaded mistake. How do you view Jordan so far, and what are proper expectations for him moving forward?
Yeah, I think the overall body of work from Jordan Love has been just fine up to this point. Again, I know we have that 1 interception that's front of mind and going to linger, but I think the offense, especially in those first 2 games, they were able to get off to fast starts and give them, the team as the whole, an upper hand against 2 really good opponents. I think where the lulls have come in, right? There's that third quarter against Detroit, the kind of the second half for a bit against Washington. I think a lot of it stems back to the struggles, for lack of a better term, or lack of efficiency, I'll say it, the Packers have had in the run game. When you're only picking up 2-3 yards a carry and you're in these constant second and third and long situations where it's predictable passing down, the defense, just from a pure X's and O's standpoint, is going to have the upper hand in those situations. Consistently being able to move the ball down the field when you're in those, again, schematically disadvantageous situations, it's difficult. And so I think that's why the Packers are running into those lulls that they're having on the offensive side of the ball. And then again, in the Cleveland game, so many of the issues, or the biggest issue that Love experienced in the offense as a whole, was he was under, constant pressure in that game. And that is just a nearly impossible way for any quarterback to live, when even some of the quick passing game concepts that LaFleur had dialed up just to get the ball out of his hands, there were defenders in the backfield almost immediately. So again, it's always going to be a combination of things, but I think the overall body of work that Jordan Love has put together this season has been good for this Packers team.
No, I think so too. And I think, to your point, I don't think the offensive line has been great even in the first 2 games. When I think a little bit more under the radar, and certainly we've seen that in the run blocking, but you've had no run game. Obviously in this game, no Jaden Reed, still no Christian Watson to start the season. And I think overall, given all the kind of, I don't want to make chaos is strong, but like all the maybe like little deficiencies that have been around him, I think he's handled everything very, very well, outside of, again, a very disappointing throw in a very key moment in that game, which I know he would like to have back as well. But so far, I would put a more than passing grade on this season for Jordan Love. And I think it's only going to continue to get better. And I don't know that they're going to face a defense as good as that Cleveland defense all year long again either. And I certainly don't think they're going to have a game from an offensive line standpoint where they play that poorly again all season, at least hopefully freaking not. But yeah, I think this is a good season so far, good start to the season for Jordan Love. And I think there's some opportunities for it even to improve from here. And hopefully that's the case moving forward. From one Jordan to another, Jordan Morgan was obviously one of the players in this game that I think rightfully got a lot of, just frustration from fans. I'm sure it's not easy having to go, not starting the game to going in at right tackle where he really hasn't had much time at all, to then having to switch inside to left guard. And then, obviously also going against a very talented Browns defensive line. He also has kind of the issue on the field goal as well, where the one that got blocked. Does Green Bay need to just kind of, and I know we heard from Matt yesterday kind of saying this as well, but do they need to kind of just focus him in a little bit more on maybe one spot, maybe 2 spots, rather than saying, yep, we're just going to play him everywhere?
I think so. And like you said, LaFleur even acknowledged that to a degree. And I don't doubt that since Jordan Morgan has been drafted by the Packers through last Sunday's game, that he has had some right tackle snaps in practice. What I don't know is how many of those
Yeah.
right tackle snaps that he has had in practice. Because I think even through like training camp and stuff like that, like I don't recall seeing him. And again,
Nope.
I know that's just a glimpse, right? We get to see in the grand scheme of practice time very little. So again, I'm sure he's had snaps there, but again, I don't know how much. And from the jump at that position, and again, the Cleveland front definitely played a role in this, but he just looked uncomfortable. And that contributed to obviously the play, contributed to the penalties. And you just wonder if that kind of started to snowball, where even being back at left guard in the second half when he took over for Aaron Banks, there were still pass rushers getting past him. There was still a penalty at that point in the game as well. So it just from the start appeared to be very disjointed from Jordan Morgan. And again, it wasn't just him. He wasn't the sole contributor to the offensive line. It was just about everyone along that offensive line. And that just had such a negative trickle down because the Packers averaged under 3 yards per rush, like I mentioned earlier, in those long down and distance situations. And you don't have time in the pocket if you're Jordan Love for those deep, let alone even intermediate routes to start developing. So now your only mode of transportation down the field is plotting your way, right? 3 yard run, 6 yard completion. Like you have to play mistake free football and then go 11, 12, 13 plays. And the Packers weren't playing mistake free football,
Nope.
but even if they were, asking your offense to do that over the course of 4 quarters, you are just not going to put up a lot of points in that game. So from the jump, this was a challenge for this defense or for this offense, made more difficult by the self-inflicted mistakes that they had. And to Jordan Morgan specifically at that right tackle spot, just looked uncomfortable from the beginning.
If I'm Green Bay, I'm doing one of two things. A few things. One, I'm going to make Darian Kennard hey, sorry, bud, but you're going to have to do the left tackle, left guard, right tackle. You're probably going to be the 8th guy on the offensive line, and you're going to have to be the guy that kind of knows a little bit of everything. For Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton, I think my initial would be Morgan is going to practice left guard, right guard only. Belton's going to practice left tackle, right tackle only. If there's a tackle injury, it's Belton. If it's a guard injury, it's Morgan. And then after that, you start to figure out some moving pieces around. The only other thing I would say is if you don't want to do it that way, then the only other thing I would say would be do Morgan left tackle, left guard, and Belton right tackle, right guard. So they're staying on the same side of the line and just just focusing him in on a little bit more narrow rather than this broad sort of situation. I kind of honestly like the left tackle, left guard for Morgan and right tackle, right guard for Belton a little bit more. And then again, as your 8th guy, sorry, Darian Kennard, you got to know everything just in case. And same thing with Donovan Jennings as the 9th guy. But I just want to make sure that those two players in particular, as a former 1st round pick and 2nd round pick, that those guys are getting a little bit more focused and have a little less on their plate so that they can go about trying to master something rather than just grasping at straws to be okay at everything. Hey friends, it's time to start getting our sleeper picks in for week 4. Vikings, Steelers, our first international game of the year. I think this one's going to be a defensive struggle, so I'm going to be going fewer on a lot of these categories, including Aaron Rodgers, fewer than 202.5 passing yards. I think this Vikings defense is going to be all over Aaron Rodgers, and I think passing the football is going to be extremely difficult in this game. Meanwhile, Jordan Mason, less than 79.5 rushing yards. To me, this Steelers defense is going to make Carson Wentz beat them and make sure that Jordan Mason is not getting the requisite yardage to need to get a win internationally. So I'm going Jordan Mason, fewer than 79.5 rushing yards. And last but not least, Justin Jefferson, more than 5.5 receptions. This is the one that I'm making an exception on for what I believe is going to be a defensive struggle. I think Minnesota is going to feed Justin Jefferson, get him involved early and often, and make him the star of that Sunday morning international game. Just to recap, Aaron Rodgers, fewer than 202.5 passing yards, Jordan Mason, fewer than 79.5 rushing yards, and Justin Jefferson, more than 5.5 receptions. Make sure to get your picks in over on Sleeper. You can get a 100% match up to $100 by using code PACKET. Again, a 100% match up to $100 by utilizing code PACKET. Make sure to use that code. Check it out over on Sleeper. And make sure that you understand that terms and conditions can apply. So check out those terms and conditions over on Sleeper. It is available in over 25 states. So what are you waiting for? Get after it right now.
Yeah, versatility is great. We know the Packers covet it, but I think you summed it up well at the end. You also want to make sure that your young players are getting confident and comfortable in some specific roles as well. So when given those opportunities, they can go out there and maximize them and play at a high level. And just to take this in a little bit of a different direction, going back to the running game, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the inconsistencies with the offense up to this point has been, that's been a big factor in it. And part of it is a product of how the opponents are playing Green Bay. Like all three of these teams said, we are not going to let Josh Jacobs get going. And credit to them. They've done a good job of that. So, and Matt LaFleur highlighted this on Monday. How do you overcome that? You got to start hitting on some of those more downfield opportunities that arise. That's why against Washington, we saw Jordan Love airing the ball out so much, because that's where the area of opportunity was in that game. And when it came to this Browns game in particular, as I mentioned, you can't get the run game going. Jordan Love didn't have a lot of time in the pocket for those longer developing routes to be there for him to even have the opportunity to take those shot plays downfield. So it was like this just vicious cycle, right? That just kept going round and round and round of, well, we can't get the run game going because they're loading the box. Well, we can't get them to unload the box because we don't have time in the pocket from their pass rush to be able to try to push the ball downfield. And you're just left felt like spinning your tires, right? Just kind of doing the same thing over and over again. We go back to having to plot your way down the football field. It's not a great way to put up a lot of points. And you end up in a game where you score 10 points in total. You add in the penalties to it. And just from start to finish, I mean, the Browns defense was the one doing the dictating over the Packers offense in that one.
Yeah, they certainly were. And it's just one of those things where the offensive line is going to have to kind of clean up, obviously, some of their mistakes, play a little bit more cohesive football. And I'm just really hoping that as the course of the season goes along, that offensive line starts to gel together a little bit more, although it's going to be very difficult right now with some of the injuries to Zach Tom and Aaron Banks, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. I do want to go over to the defensive side of the ball, which there were positive takeaways, thankfully. Paul, when you go and get Micah Parsons, a piece of that it was, man, this should really make things a lot easier and better for Rashawn Gary and LVN, Devontae Wyatt, etc. I think we all had a vision for that, but you still wanted to see it, actually out on the field. And so far, I think the vision that you had of not only Micah being a terror on his side, but now all of a sudden Rashawn Gary, LVN, Devontae Wyatt getting a bunch of one-on-ones. We have seen that so far. I thought Rashawn Gary was fantastic in this one. LVN, I thought all three of those guys have been really good through 3 games so far, but we're starting to see that vision really come to fruition through 3 games already.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you asked the question, or we can ask the question, right? Who's going to be the biggest benefactor of adding Micah Parsons to this defense? And I just kind of want to say everyone at this point, right? Yeah. From the who he's on the defensive line with to the secondary. And Gary, I believe, was one of the more higher chipped edge defenders in football last season. And so now all of that attention that he was garnering last year is now obviously going elsewhere to Micah Parsons, leaving him to have these advantageous situations. And the same goes for Lucas Van Ness and then Devontae Wyatt as well. And credit to them as well. While Parsons is maybe playing a role in creating those mismatches, they're then going out there and taking advantage of them as well. And that Packers pass rush has been, man, it's been lights out. And I know last week we spent time talking about the communication component on the back end with the secondary, but I remember after the Washington game, Gary specifically talking about the defensive line and their communication and again, just comfort in Jeff Hafley's system. He said it's at a different level this year compared to where it was even last season and throughout Gary's time with the Packers. And I asked Devontae Wyatt about this as well, just to get his perspective. I mean, it gets overlooked with defensive line play, but when you know how the player next to you, the tackler end, is going to rush or respond in a specific situation based on what the offense does or how the play unfolds, and then all right, he's going to do this, so here's what I'm going to do to counter or to put myself in a situation or to help him get through. I mean, that is some next level opportunities that can be created for a defensive line. So Micah Parsons, obviously, and nothing needs to be said there. The individual performances from Gary, Van Ness, White, and everyone else to take advantage of those opportunities, obviously critical. But I think that, again, that communication element and just understanding of what everyone around you is going to do and how they're going to respond, I think is what is helping as well, is playing a role in helping this Packers pass rush level up this season.
What I love too is we saw last year Jeff Hafley obviously be able to cook up some creative things to get some free rushers and things like that. And while he doesn't need to do that as much anymore, because you can just rush with 4 and those 4 have been effective, he also still has that in his back pocket of like, oh, also every once in a while, I'm just going to throw something at you that you did not expect to see coming. I can only imagine for Rashawn Gary, where, as you mentioned, he's so used to being chipped and double teamed and like, oh, I got past the tight end. Now I've got a great offensive tackle that I got to try to go through after this. He all of a sudden gets that play where like nobody blocks him. And I can only imagine him going like just grinning from ear to ear, being like, man, this used to be 2-3 guys I had to get through, and now just nobody's blocking me. Like, I will gladly take this. And again, it's well deserved. It's well earned. He had to eat a lot of those double teams, over the last few seasons. So you're just seeing him, I think, be this huge benefactor. And again, sometimes in that one case, not even getting blocked at all in that play. And of course, going and finishing that play with a sack as well. So it's been fun to watch. It's been, I think, even better than expected. And to your point, a ton of credit to Gary, LVN, Wyatt for taking advantage of those opportunities, and still fun to see some of those things that Jeff Hafley can cook up. The NFL is so weird, Paul, because we go into the season thinking, oh, offensive line going to be one of the real strengths of this team, and corner going to be one of the areas where you're just like, I'm not sure. I don't think they're going to be able to hold up. Well, it's the offensive line that's had the issues so far. The corner room, meanwhile, has been freaking phenomenal. I don't know what more you could possibly ask from that group so far, but for all the angst and anxiety over the Nixon, Hobbs, Bullard, Valentine group, man, it is not easy to throw out those guys right now.
No, they're playing extremely well right now. And even last season, during that final half of the season when Jair wasn't out there, this group still did a really good job of limiting big plays. I mean, Keyshawn Nixon was one of the best in yards per catch allowed. Carrington Valentine was up there as well in that regard. So this group has done a good job in that capacity. I remember talking with you either last season or this offseason where the area of improvement was the efficiency, right? Because even though if you only give up 9-10 yards per catch for an outside cornerback, which is good, but you're allowing a completion rate of 65, 70, 75%, offenses are still likely to find some success against your defense through the air in that regard. But they've been able to eliminate a lot of those completions. And again, it's a team effort. It's this pass rush that we're talking about, obviously playing a factor in it. It's like we talked about last week, the communication and everything that Jeff Hafley is dialing up for that defense. And not to be overlooked either, Xavier McKinney's role. And all this. I mean, Hafley talked about it last Thursday, where offenses aren't even looking at where he is on the field out of respect, right? Because like, oh, he's there, we're not going to go to that part of the field. So there are sections of the field that are now being taken away essentially just because McKinney is there patrolling it. So I absolutely do not want to take away from the play of Nixon, Hobbs, and Valentine, because at the end of the day, you still have to go out there, execute your job, your responsibility, cover the guy across from you. That Washington game, Keyshawn Nixon was all over the pass catchers that he was responsible for. But it's been a very much a group effort, which is what football is, right? It's the ultimate team game. Everyone has to be operating on the same page for the play to operate successfully. And that's what we're seeing right now. And the cornerbacks are very much benefiting from that.
I think that's well said. And I totally agree, because when you have a pass rush up front that's getting home very quick, and when you have an eraser over the top in Xavier McKinney, who can play that center field so well, man, does that give you confidence as a corner to be able to play a little bit closer, a little bit tighter, maybe jump a route every now and then, because if they are going for a double move or something, that defense the defensive front might just get there before that double move even has the ability to, actually, develop. And then even if it does, you've got Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, et cetera, floating up over the top where, they may have that covered anyway, even if you aren't, maybe in the spot that you're supposed to be in. So yeah, when you've got that safety over the top and that defensive front getting to the quarterback right away, it certainly does make the job a little bit easier. But to your point, they still have to go out and execute. And I think the Nixon game against Washington is a great example of that. And nobody's even trying Carrington Valentine right now. Like they're not even thrown in his direction either. He's been so sticky in coverage. And this goes back to what I kind of talked about before the start of the season, where there was some frustration with the corners of a well-taught, well-communicating zone defense. you don't necessarily need prime Darrelle Revis or prime Deion Sanders or like one of those players to go out and shut down a player. You're shutting down areas of the field and you are confusing the hell out of quarterbacks because of pre and post snap motion and constantly being in communication on how to pass off different concepts. This is a very smart defensive backfield, and that can get you very far. And I think we're seeing that so far.
Yeah, another great Jeff Halfley line you said last week, a communicating defense is a confident defense. And again,
well
I know it's hard to see on the TV copy, but the secondary, they are constant communication, hand signals, getting everyone set, communicating responsibilities before the snap of the ball. And for how good the pass rush is, McKinney on the back end, and just the overall versatility from Jeff Halfley's perspective, it honestly feels like there's just endless possibilities out there because you have all these really talented players. You have a lot of versatility, a lot of speed, and then you have a defensive coordinator who's willing to draw up basically anything that he thinks can be successful. And it feels like the Packers, like I said, have endless possibilities in terms of what they can throw at opposing offenses.
No, I totally agree. All right, a couple quick ones before we get you out of here. Some key injuries coming out of this one. Of course, Zach Tom, Aaron Banks on the offensive line, Javon Bullard at safety, and then there it sounds like Devontae Wyatt day-to-day as well. Where's your level of concern with some of these injuries?
Yeah, the Zach Tom one, at least my interpretation of what LaFleur said was that he didn't re-aggravate the injury. It was just that the injury that was still being worked through in that game, I think ended up being, too much. Right. And so that's how I interpreted it. So I guess we'll have to see, what this week brings, but having the bye week on the horizon for the Packers, I'm sure could play a factor in their decision-making. Aaron Banks dropped out as well with the groin injury. And then, like you said, Javon Bullard's in concussion protocol. But as we look at the upcoming week specifically, wondering what Tom's status is, wondering what Banks' status is, seeing, again, how the offensive line performed against, again, a very, very good Browns defensive front. And again, that's where success for your offense starts, is that consistency, run game to lean on, time in the pocket. That's going to be one of the big things just to kind of monitor as the week goes on and see, all right, how does that impact the overall offensive performance this coming week?
Yeah, I think so too. And hopefully some of those injuries can get cleared up. But I think your point is spot on of the bye coming up in a week, and do you not want to maybe some of these guys go out turf against Dallas? Hopefully you can pick up this win and get some of those guys healthy, and then you got Cincinnati at home the week after that. So hopefully some of these players have a couple weeks here to heal up. Plus you have the potential to get some of your injured reserve players and PUP players back after week 4 as well. So we'll see how some of those players are coming along after the bye week also. Last but not least, Packers, Cowboys. We learned that CeeDee Lamb going to be out for this game. Their rookie guard Tyler Booker going to be out for this game. Your quick thoughts on this one?
I think for me, this week is less about, right, I know we've talked last week about Myles Garrett and the Browns defense. For me, this matchup is less about Dallas and it's about the Packers. And circling back to our original conversation when we started today, how do they respond, right?
Yeah.
Can they go out and bounce back? Can they mitigate the penalties? Can they have a clean outing? Can the offensive line play improve? Can they get the run game going? Those are kind of the big questions, right? You have a crushing loss, a mistake-filled, disappointing performance. So the big thing I'm looking at is, all right, so how do you respond from that? How do you learn from that? How do you overcome that? How do you bounce back?
Yeah, I think so too. I also just want to see this Packers run game get going finally. And it would be even more ideal if they did it against this new vaunted Dallas Cowboys run defense that they've put together. No, it's going to be a fun game. I think Green Bay figures out a way to bounce back in a pretty significant way. I'm sure, Micah Parsons is going to be pretty fired up for this one. And I'm expecting a big bounce back from the Packers offense as well. Paul, I cannot thank you enough. Where can we find all of your wonderful work?
I appreciate it, Andy. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. Find my written work at the Wisconsin State Journal. Find me on the radio waves, ESPN, Lacrosse, Sports Lead, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6.
Go follow him. He's the absolute best. Covers the Packers like no other. Again, Paul_Bretl. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. That's going to do it for us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.